Hey everyone, this is Katie with Empowering Astrology, and this is another live look at the astrology of December 21st to 27th, 2020. So, as I record this, we're in the last full week of 2020. So, I think we can't quite say yet that we made it, but we've almost made it. And we are also, as we start the week, we are rounding out a series of marquee astrology, is the best way I can put it. It's funny, or maybe just completely on brand with 2020, that we are cramming a lot of big stuff in at the end of the year. So as I record this, we've just had the winter solstice. Happy birthday, Capricorn. We've just had a historic alignment of Jupiter and Saturn, something called the Great Conjunction, something that happens only once every 20 years. And we'll kind of get a little bit more into that, and as well what some of the other things that are going on this week, of course. And we can't forget the fact that just last week, it feels like another country at this point, Saturn went to Aquarius on December 17th, followed very quickly by Jupiter into Aquarius on December 19th. So we are in a new time that began right with eclipse season. So the eclipses in general already tell us that it's time for something new. It's time for a new act in our life. Well, it just turns out that we've got some heavy-hitting astrology that sort of is bringing a punctuation point to the year. So again, my name is Katie Sweetman. I am an astrologer and psychic medium here in Brooklyn, New York, and we've been gathering every week for probably the last year and a half to talk about the astrology live, to talk about how do we work with this time, because we certainly are living through unprecedented times. I think that's probably going to continue into the new year. Everybody's like, what's going to happen, Katie? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just going to be different. Just going to be different. But there are some things, of course, that we can look towards, and we'll be talking about that in next week's broadcast. But, I have a particular philosophy, is that the astrology is 50% you are the other 50%. So how do you align yourself? How do you use this intense astrology to transform yourself? And I've been having this conversation with friends, with clients, and 2020 was a difficult year, and I'll be completely honest with you, it's one of the most, I won't say difficult, I would say one of the hardest years of my life. But I think a lot of good things came out of this time. There was definitely, for me personally, I realized that's not the case for everybody. So silver lining. And so I think somewhere, maybe, hopefully for you in all of this, there's a silver lining. Nevertheless, how do we use this intense astrology of 2020, maybe even intense astrology of 2021, to shape, to reshape, to transform, to build ourselves into the highest potential of our astrology, and also, of course, be good human beings on this planet. And it's all about hopefully being better human beings now that we've got two planets in Aquarius. So just to recap some of the astrology, I mentioned this a few moments ago, we had two planets go into Aquarius last week. We had Saturn go into Aquarius, followed by Jupiter. Now, it's as if two big hands on the astrology clock. Yeah, astrology is a clock. It's just a calendar. It's a way of telling time, telling metaphoric time, telling symbolic time. Well, the planets, it's as if they are hands on the clock. So last week, two of those big hands started to point towards Aquarius. So you may be thinking, Katie, I'm not an Aquarius, I'm a Taurus, I'm a whatever. You are all 12 signs. And one of the things I'm going to do in 2021 in honor of Aquarius is I'm going to push you all. I want to push you all. I want to start bringing in a little bit more technical information, of course, breaking it down in ways that we can understand, because this is the thing about astrology. It's not just one, color in the palette. It's not one crayon in the crayon box. It's not just your sun. You have this whole other spread of planets that symbolize you on a personal level, on a collective level, on a karmic level, on a spiritual level, on a soul level. And knowing what planet is what starts to give you a language, astrology is a language, to be able to describe you, your life, your potential, your path. And this is why I do astrology, because it's so powerful. It connects the dots. It takes away some of the existential guessing work. So next year, we got 2 planets, sort of the hand on the clock is pointing towards Aquarius. So Aquarius is one of the last signs of the zodiac. It's the 11th sign. And Aquarius, somewhere in your astrology, governs over a particular part of your life. Aquarius may be your career sign if you're Taurus. It may be your relationship sign if you're Leo, for example. But somewhere, Aquarius and somewhere, Saturn and Jupiter have just sort of walked in the room. So what do they want? Well, they walked in the room. We know Saturn is the planet of lessons. We know Saturn is the planet that tells us about what are we working on the next 2 years. Jupiter, it's got a little bit of a reputation in astrology as being like the Santa Claus, the good fortune. Yeah, there are blessings in Jupiter, but at the same time, Jupiter can make things bigger, can make a mess bigger, or it can make our initiative bigger, our drive bigger. It can give us the faith and the optimism to keep pushing forward, even when we're tired, even when we're not sure. So yeah, Jupiter and Saturn just walked into one of the rooms in your house, and we got to get a sense of what they want over the next year, if not longer, because this is what this whole great conjunction was all about. Today, on December 21st, Saturn and Jupiter aligned in the sky for the first time in 20 years. 20 years ago, in May of 2000, they aligned in Taurus. And the thing that makes this conjunction even more interesting is that this is the first time, minus 1981, that they are in air signs. So when the last time that Jupiter and Saturn came together, it was in an earth sign, it was in Taurus. It was the last time for 200, well, that was the end of a 200-year cycle where they would all be in earth signs. Jupiter and Saturn are 2 planets that talk about life on the level of society, the collective, humanity, sort of the laws that govern us, the sort of agreements that we all make collectively, the systems and the organizations. And now everything's shifting towards air. So you got 200 years, 200 years where the next conjunctions every 20 years are going to be in air signs. So this means that on a grander scale, you and I, we're not going to be here to see the next 200 years unless, I don't know, something radically changes in the next weeks and days and months and years. But nevertheless, we're not going to be here. So we're not going to see what this great cycle is going to be about. We can focus on the next 20 years. Hopefully we'll be here in 20 years. But we can say, we can predict maybe that the next 200 years are going to be something about air. It's communication. It's throat chakra. It's communication. It's connection. It's society. It's humanity. It's systems and networks. It's equity. It's technology. Maybe there's going to be big shifts in technology. Maybe there's going to be big shifts in how we connect to one another over the next 200 years. The last 200 years, the conjunctions were happening in Taurus. Oh, not Taurus. They were happening in earth signs. The last one was in Taurus. And earth signs are about money and industry and things that are tangible and goods and the earth. And so, you can look back over the last 200 years and see both sides of that conjunction, meaning the sides that are good, the sides not so good. So it's not, I know there's a lot of things going around the internet right now, different astrological conversations, maybe even different spiritual conversations, that this is the start of the age of Aquarius. I can't comment on that because there's a lot of debate on whether or not this is the start of when the start of the age of Aquarius even is going to happen. For some people, it already did happen. It happened with, in the 20th century. It happened maybe 1960s, or maybe it hasn't happened yet. Simply the age of Aquarius means that the spring equinox The sun is rising in the sign of Aquarius at the start, like I said, the spring equinox. And this is something that every 2,000 years, God, we're talking about big arcs of time tonight. Every 2,000 years, the point where the sun rises shifts to a new zodiac sign. So that's why that for the last 2,000 years, we were in the age of Pisces, because Pisces was actually the sign that was rising in the east at the moment of the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere. Before that, it was the age of Aries. We're actually going backwards. But age of Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. Astrology sort of fixes things to Aries. Astrology is an old system, so it sort of fixes to a system that predates the age of Pisces, going back into the age of Aries. Astrology, I would gather, is even older than 2,000 years, even older than 3,000 years. I think it's very old. Nevertheless, we're sort of Western astrology fixes to Aries being the first sign of the zodiac. But if you have a telescope or if you know astronomy, that's shifted over the last 2,000 years. Sorry, we got into a little bit of a history lesson. We got a little bit into an astronomy lesson. Like I said, I'm going to start, things are in Aquarius now. We're going to start breaking out the big textbooks and talking about big nerdy things, because Aquarius is the sign of intellect, sign of science and technology. We're going to talk about big things over the coming weeks and over the coming year with 2 planets in Aquarius. So this is why I'm not sure. Is it the start of the age of Aquarius? I can't say. Is it going to be kittens and rainbows for the next however many years? Probably not. I hope. I really, I'm betting on humanity. I'm betting that we're all going to figure this out somehow. But Aquarius will show us where we're connected. Aquarius will show us where we're disconnected. There are always 2 sides. We just have to make a choice. Are we going to build new systems? Are we going to build new systems that are based on connection, that are based on equity, that are based on balance? Are we going to build something different? It's just a choice. Unfortunately, that choice has a lot of impact on a lot of different lives. So this is we're talking big level stuff. So we'll kind of bring it down to, day-to-day, personal level stuff. So as I was starting to say earlier, you're not just your sun. You've got Saturn somewhere in your chart when you were born. You've got a Mercury, you've got a Venus, you've got a Mars. So it's like, this is why we're starting to play with a lot of different planets and understanding what these planets are symbolic of. So we have Saturn just went into Aquarius. Saturn is symbolic of authority, of manifestation, of structure, of power. It's also lessons, it's also karma. And I tell people that as long as you are in a body, you are under the rules of Saturn. You age, you grow older, there's karma. You have to work on your karma. You have to sort of build something. So this is sort of one of the things that we're working on now that Saturn has moved signs to Aquarius. Jupiter, it's a planet of faith, truth, meaning. Both Saturn and Jupiter talk about learning. They're 2 planets that teach us. I see Saturn as a teacher as much as I see Jupiter as a teacher. Maybe that's a little bit of a non-traditional look at astrology, because Jupiter has this reputation in astrology as being the teacher, being the guru, and rightly so. But I think that Jupiter, the lessons, there's a sense of expansion and growth, and Jupiter gets us out of the house, it gets us out into the world, it gets us curious about life. And Saturn can, but it's a very different process. We sort of doubt ourselves. We need to get out in the world. We need to make something of ourselves, but it's an uphill climb. Nevertheless, these 2 planets are teaching us something. They're just teaching us 2 very different ways. So we have these 2 teachers, these 2 planets that talk about society on a grand level, and now these huge arcs of time, for the next 200 years or the next 20 years, or if we're getting super zoomed out, the last time we had a conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius was 1406. It was the beginning of the 15th century. So these are things that just don't happen very often. The last time we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in air signs, it was 1186 until 1406. So wasn't a lot going on back then. It depends on what part of the world you're looking at. Certainly there was other things happening in other civilizations. Nevertheless, here we are. So let's just recap. Like I said, Saturn and Jupiter change signs. They walked into a part of your house, a certain room. So if you are an Aries, they have walked into the room of friends, community, the part of you that wants to get involved in something bigger. It's groups, it's allies, alliances. It's also a part of the house that talks about the future. Like, what does this all mean? Like, now that you're sort of coming off Aries, you're coming off of this career time, what are now your next goals? Because in theory, the last 2 years, Aries are about you achieving certain goals, and now you have to prepare. What are your next aspirations? What are your next hopes and dreams for the coming years, if not the coming decades? So Saturn is sort of taking a hard look at your friends right now. Sometimes when Saturn gets into this part of the house, it can be a little brutal with who we are connected with, and if these people have our best our best interests in mind. So next kind of days, months, weeks, and years, you gotta get very clear about who your friends are. Jupiter's there, so maybe it's kind of helping you get out more. Jupiter kind of propels us forward. It gives us a little bit more of a push, a little bit of motivation, a little bit of drive to be able to go out there and meet new friends, new community, make new community. Taurus. So this Saturn and Jupiter just walked into your career sign. And Saturn's going to be there until March of 2023, but Jupiter is there as well. Now, typically, when Saturn is there, you're sort of answering a simple question. What do you want to be when you grow up? Jupiter is there too, and if we took Saturn out of the equation, Jupiter typically shows where an area is opening up to opportunities. So this could be a coming year of career opportunities, but you got to do the Saturn work as well. You have to hustle, you have to set boundaries, you have to go after things, you have to figure out what is it that you want to do in the world. What's the title you want after your name? What's the responsibility? You sort of, the bar is set high for you right now. Gemini. So Gemini, you're coming out of a pretty heavy 3-year period, but now Saturn and Jupiter, I keep wanting to say Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter have walked into the room in your house that talks about faith and truth and meaning. So yeah, Gemini, after everything that you've been through, after all the deep soul searching, all the deep psychological work and transformation, and even the times over the last 3 years where you didn't have faith, what does it all mean? The next year, if not more, it's going to be a very existential time. It could be a time where you're making new strides, new initiatives in your search for the answers in life, but even on another level to go back to school or education or getting the training that you need. Not traveling so much these days, if at all. So normally this would be a time when traveling abroad or making long distance journeys would be really highlighted going into the new year. Maybe you're just having to do that metaphorically. Maybe you're having to search and explore and to look out into the world in a way that is just going to be very different in 2021 than, let's say, it was 2 years ago or more. Cancer, you are stepping into a time, let's say Jupiter and Saturn have walked into a very particular part of your house. Call it the 8th room. The 8th room is the room that we all have to go through at some point. It could be a day, once a month. It could be once a year, different season. But this is also your time for the next 2 years where you have to face yourself. Do a lot of deep inner work, a lot of deep transformation. You can go find a Gemini. Maybe your friend's a Gemini, and you can say, what was it like the last 2 years, 3 years? The difference is they had Pluto in this part of their house. You don't, so it's not as intense. Nevertheless, it's a time when you have to do a lot of deep inner work and a lot of deep inner transformation. If you are going into this time, this is also a money room in your house. If you're going into this time and you have not gotten your financial stuff in order, Saturn is going to start looking at the books. So Cancer, if you have unpaid taxes, if you don't have your bank accounts in order, I'm just kind of giving you a little heads up. Saturn wants everything line item tip top. Once you have a will, sorry, I'm a Scorpio, I talk about wills. Once you talk to a financial planner, once you have all those things organized, because they can't be, you can't neglect them anymore. Leo. So Leo, big time for you, because Saturn and Jupiter, Pluto, I'm so used to Saturn and Pluto just being joined at the hip. Thankfully they're not anymore, because that was pretty brutal. Saturn and Jupiter just walked into your relationship sign. So the coming year is very much about new beginnings, new cycles, new relationships, or new chapters in existing relationships. When Saturn by itself walks into this part of your house, Saturn's like the inspector. Saturn's like, well, let's look at your relationships. And Saturn doesn't like relationships that are imbalanced. It doesn't like, my partner has all the power, or I'm afraid of this person, or my relationships are a mess. And even if you're not in a relationship, this, of course, can describe all relationships. So Saturn actually does some of its best work in this part of the house. Saturn's exalted in Libra. It's a whole other conversation. This would be it's called an accidental dignity. But Saturn really wants you to get all your relationships in order, balanced. It wants you to commit. It wants you to define what is it that you and the person you're seeing, for example, what are you doing? If you are in a marriage or in a serious long-term committed partnership, it's about the next milestones. It could be events within the relationship. It could be moving in with one another. It could be baby. It could be some other thing happening in the relationship. If something's not working, Saturn can be a little bit like, this relationship has to end. That's of course not going to be for everybody. If you are single, this is a time to get really serious about if you want a relationship, you want partnership, because sort of the window is open for you right now. Leo. Virgo. So Saturn and Jupiter have just walked into the part of your house that talks about how you take care of yourself, your health, your wellness, fitness, diet, nutrition, work, organization, order, projects. So Saturn is like, we're going to work. We're going to work for the next 2 years. We're going to get in shape. We're going to clean out the kitchen. We're going to start juicing. We're going to start doing this. And because it's Aquarius, maybe you're getting into alternative medicine or energy work. Maybe you're creating new systems and new pathways for organization over the next couple of years. But like I said, Saturn just wants balance. So if there's something about your physical life or your day-to-day life that's out of balance, here comes Saturn. Jupiter gives you hopefully the faith, the motivation, and the wherewithal to make these positive changes. We are, to be fair, it's Capricorn season. It's a time of setting resolutions and kind of setting goals for the year as much as we can in these times. So how do you start to set some really healthy goals and healthy milestones for your physical life? Saturn just wants sustainability. This isn't about, eating certain foods, whatever. Listen to your body. Listen to what your body needs and wants at this time, but something has to get really back in order, back in balance, and if that means fitness, if that means nutrition, if that means even a toxic work life, it's got to go. Saturn doesn't like this stuff. Um, and then we have, what's after Virgo, Libra. So Libra, this Saturn and Jupiter have just walked into the part of your chart that is, or part of your house, that's asking you, do you know who you are? Now, Jupiter by itself in this room of your house, it likes to play, it likes to create. It has a lot of personality. It feels very, outgoing, very, like they say, creative already. But Saturn is like, wants to make it serious. Saturn is like, you got to take yourself, you got to take your talent seriously. And we're going to be having some serious play over the next 2 years. And if you don't know who you are, and a lot of people don't, who they are is actually just an amalgam of what their family wants or what their friends want or something else. And so Saturn is saying, like, who are you? Like, be you. Don't be anybody else. Side note, if having a family, starting a family, getting pregnant is something that you aspire to, you've got this 2-year window, probably not the only 2-year window, but a 2-year window nevertheless when starting a family is very highlighted for you, Libra. And, Libra, you are coming at a time where it is about, or was about putting down roots and settling down, so that just might be the natural outcome of that milestone in your life over the last 2 years. Scorpio, so Jupiter and Saturn have just walked into the bottom of your chart, the bottom of your house, the room that's about home and family and roots and foundation. And you're in a time, Scorpio, that's about settling down. It's maybe, over the next year, there's a big move, or maybe there's something about family that's coming up a lot. Maybe you are starting your own family. Maybe you want to get very serious about who is in your family and who is not in your family. But nevertheless, this is, Saturn wants stability. This is the bottom of the house. It's the part that sort of holds everything else. And you need people. You need people around you. You need like that inner circle. And you, Scorpio, cannot do it all alone. So there might be new beginnings and big new beginnings in your home life over the coming year. When Saturn is in this part of the house, it's not uncommon for there to be either purchase of a home or a big move that's symbolic of this new time. Sagittarius. So Saturn and Jupiter have just walked into the part of your house we'll call the third room. It's about your voice. It's about communication. It's about how people hear you, how you take yourself seriously and take that voice seriously. Now, it's Aquarius, and Aquarius has got a lot of, just out of the box, a lot of intelligence behind it. So this is the room that's normally about taking classes, learning, going to school. But Sagittarius, you have a reputation for being the teacher, not the student. So maybe you are either going back to school to kind of brush up on your wisdom and knowledge, or maybe you are teaching over the next couple of years. This is the room that also talks about writing, speaking. So maybe you're going to have a lot to say over the coming year or two. Maybe you are starting that big new novel, that big new book. Maybe you have a lot more to say. Maybe you're doing more public speaking. But this is a time when you have to sort of take your intelligence and take your mind seriously. Side note, because I know this is the start of a 20-year cycle, it's really hard to get a sense of like how this moment in time threads to over the next 20 years. But maybe if you journal, maybe if you take personal notes, you can be like, all right, this was the start of this time, and maybe 20 years from now we get back together and like, okay, what was going on at the end of 2020? What sort of new cycle opened? How can we find the thread? But this is a time that's where you are really sort of committing to expressing your voice, expressing your mind, expressing your intelligence. Capricorn. So Capricorn, good news, Saturn is not in Capricorn anymore. Hallelujah. So Saturn has now gone into Aquarius. Aquarius is one of your money signs. So the next 2 years are about how you take care of your financial life. How do you earn a living? How do you spend your money? What do you spend your money on? Do you have money? But this more intrinsic question of what's of value to you? What's your value? So Saturn and Jupiter are now in this room, and Jupiter by itself, sometimes when Jupiter goes into this part of the astrology house, it's a time of abundance. It's a time of spending money. It's a time of making money. We feel like we have a lot of resources. The thing that makes it a little bit more complicated is Saturn is there. Saturn is very kind of practical and stern and thinks about the future. So if there are any financial windfalls, how do you sort of store it away? How do you make prudent investments? How do you maybe, if you need to, make some changes in how you earn a living, and maybe one that's a little bit more in alignment with your ideals. Aquarius is a very idealistic sign. It is about, Aquarius is one of those signs. Aquarius is like Sagittarius. Actually, Sagittarius is Aquarius's 11th sign. That's why they have some affinity with each other. So at Aquarius's core is a sense of like how the world should be, how the world should not be. Of course, we can't get too rigid, but there's a sense that maybe how you earn a living has to kind of line up with your ideals, Capricorn. So it could be that you're needing to put things in a budget, you're having to sort of go through all your financial accounts and sort of look at your spending, because look, Saturn, it's in your money sign, it's looking at the books. So that's just fair warning. When you have Saturn in a money house, Saturn's looking at the books. Saturn's looking at the receipts. Saturn does not like a mess, so you use that sort of Jupiter motivation to make some positive changes over the coming year. Pisces. Is that the last one? No, Aquarius. Sorry, Aquarius. Aquarius, a massive new time for you. It's not just Jupiter that's arriving in your sign, it's Saturn too. So when Saturn comes into your sign, the bar gets set high. Saturn is saying to you until the end of March of 2023, this is about you becoming me. It's about you becoming the authority, you becoming the leader, about you taking on more responsibility. I know you're thinking, I don't want to. Sorry. But Jupiter is there, so maybe you're going to not be so, don't care so much. But Jupiter also is you're at this point in the story where you're taking off. You're setting sail. It's a start of a new adventure. Jupiter does take 12 years to go through each of the signs of the zodiac. So it's like you're at the very beginning of a 12-year voyage. Saturn is there making sure everything is planned and organized, but this is not just the start of a 20-year cycle, it's the start of a 12-year cycle as well. But the bar is set high. You're in a new time, Aquarius, and something that I was saying, to clients, I was saying previously, maybe even mentioned it on a few lives, the last year was about really doing that psychic purge, because when you go off on this new voyage, the stuff that's coming with you into the ship is with you. So this is probably going to be a milestone time for you, Aquarius, especially as you go into 2021. Bon voyage. Lastly, Pisces. So Jupiter and Saturn have walked into your last sign. So we'll call it the last room, the 12th room of the house. And this is the room that's about God, spirituality, faith and truth and inner faith, and your connection to source and the divine, whatever you want to call it. It's a very sacred room, and it's a very quiet room. And you're spending the next 2 years there. It's a place of deep inner retreat. And Jupiter is your planet, Pisces. So you're sort of in this time where you're ending a cycle, you're ending a 12-year cycle, because Jupiter is your planet. You're sort of coming to the end also of a 30-year cycle. I know, we're talking about big cycles of time today. And so you need to, just like Aquarius had to over the past few years, do that deep psychic inventory. What are you still holding on to? What do you not want to bring with you going into 2022? What needs to be let go of? What sort of old stories, old patterns, old habits? But also, you might be using this time to go very deep within, try to find answers, meditate, spiritual searching, existential searching, looking for inner answers, and also opening up your intuition. And Pisces is out of the box. You are a very intuitive sign, so you are sort of naturally connecting to something that was already there. So that's just your sort of quick look for the 12 signs with Jupiter and Saturn going into Aquarius, what this sort of thematically means over the coming year and into next year. By the way, I did a deeper dive on Saturn and Aquarius in my webinar this past weekend. I did almost like 100-minute, so a little bit over an hour and a half webinar on Saturn and Aquarius, what Saturn means, what Aquarius means, what this idea of Aquarius time that we're in, sort of linking it back to cycles from the early 90s and the early 60s and even the previous Saturn and Aquarius cycle in the early 30s, and then what it means for each sign. So you can still get that webinar. Link is in the show notes. You can go to my website. There's a video store on my website, or you can just, like I said, go to the show notes. But this was my Saturn and Aquarius webinar. But let's also look at the astrology for the rest of this week, because there are other things, namely Mars square Pluto. So this is the thing. There's just been so much going on. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, it's the solstice. In case you forgot. By the way, it's the start of Capricorn season. Happy birthday, Capricorn. We're in a new time. Capricorn is about. We're getting towards the end of the zodiac. It's more about these things are about ambition and structures and sort of setting the bar higher for ourselves. So this is why we sort of get to this time of the year and we're thinking about the new year in that sense of like, what do I need to change? What do I need to structurally change, fundamentally change? And we can talk more about Capricorn in next week's astrology, but I did want to talk about Mars square Pluto because Mars, for those who've been paying attention, has been in Aries since the end of June. That means it's almost 6 months of Mars in Aries. This is actually quite unusual. Normally Mars spends 6 weeks in a sign. This spends 6 months. It will leave Aries and go to Taurus on January 6th. So right now, Mars is sort of rounding out its way of Aries. Now, Jupiter and Saturn have moved on. So thank God. Some of the intensity of 2020 was Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn. Really intense, heavy energy because Capricorn is very much about structure. It's about our physical world, our manifested world. But so here comes Mars. It's going to square Pluto. It's the last in a series of squares. We had one in August, one in October, and then here's the last one on December 23rd. The moon will be in Aries. I think it might even be in Aries right now. Definitely be in Aries on Tuesday and Wednesday, December 22nd, 23rd. So this is going to make this push a lot of buttons. So if you're feeling like your buttons are pressed the next couple of days, just think, okay, Katie said it's Mars square Pluto is just bringing a lot of stuff up. Pluto is like a volcano. And I think somebody mentioned that actually there was a volcanic eruption in Hawaii today. So Pluto shows us the things that we can no longer repress, the things that we can no longer deny about ourselves, our shadow. Sometimes it's the emotional material that we're not dealing with. And this whole time of Mars and Aries, because we had the retrograde back from December until November of 2020, was another look at how we do Mars. Action, aggression, power, control, struggle, force. So with Mars square Pluto, we've had to really shift and change and transform how we use our Mars, both personally and collectively over the last 6 months. So if something is coming up around action and power over the next couple of days, it's because something has to be transformed, something has to be released. It's sort of the coming to the end of a story that began back at the end of June of 2020. So if you're suddenly angry and you're like, I have no idea why I'm angry, well, then you're gonna know why. But this is sort of that last kind of bit of prickly astrology. I mean, Mars does go into Taurus in January. It will meet up with Saturn and Jupiter. We'll talk about that in the new year, but nevertheless, it's sort of, we're just a lot of big astrology that was packed in December of 2020, and it's sort of this punctuation on a very uncommon year, so it would make sense that we had some uncommon astrology. It's sort of my pet theory that 2020 was sort of this time when we all had to collectively, on a human level, get to a certain place, clear a lot of space to get there. And that's why I think 2020 was a different time for everybody. For some people, it was a huge shift. For some people, it wasn't as hard. And I think going into 2021 is the year that all these new shifts, these new times has to now take root. We now have to construct and build something with this new time. It's going to be new systems, it's going to be new values, it's going to be new ways of connection, it's going to hopefully be a different way in which we connect with one another. So nevertheless, that is your look at the astrology this week of December 21st to 27th, 2020. We're rounding out a rather crazy year. It's the last full week of 2020. So we almost made it. That said, it's a holiday week. It's a holiday season. I wish you all well. I hope you all have what you need at this time. I hope that we can continue to keep doing this together and keep growing and learning and evolving through the astrology. So again, my name is Katie Sweetman. This is Empowering Astrology. You can follow me on Instagram, on Facebook. I know we're doing this live on Facebook, but the replays on YouTube, IGTV, even on Spotify. You can listen to this on Spotify. But thank you so much. Really actually means a lot to me that we continue to do this and that you continue to support me and you continue to share my work. And a lot of you who are in the comments are my clients. And so I am truly grateful for you all throughout this time, because this was an uncommon year for me as well. It's actually been a really successful year. So I have all of you to thank. So, be well, be safe during these times. I hope you all kind of have your loved ones close. And we will connect next week to sort of really, truly ring out 2020, put a little bit of feelers for 2021, what we can expect, and get ready for the next level. So be well, be safe. Bye.